welcome to the Draft Talk podcast. We're back for season 6, doing what we do best, talking all things NFL draft. As ever, I'm your host, Brian, and joining us, these two legends, Owen and Stu. How have you been, guys?
Yeah, good, Brian. It's been a wee while since we've all been together and recorded a show. We know it's getting to draft season when we actually talk to each other again.
Yeah, it feels right, doesn't it? We've been toying about with it when would be the right time to come back on. The thing is, you can go too early when you don't have enough information, but I think right now we're just about ready to get cracking.
Indeed. We are going to dip our toe in the proverbial draft pool today. Before we dive in headfirst in the coming weeks, because as I said, it's draft season. NFL season's finished. We're in the playoffs, so yeah, all eyes will be in the draft very soon. And what we're going to do today, we're going to look at the sort of top 10 picks, see what we think might happen, talk a little bit about the teams, and then, as I said, we'll dive more into the prospects in the coming weeks. So we all know who's picking first. We knew with a game to go, and they still went at one. Good on them. It's the Las Vegas Raiders. The draft starts at 2 this year, we think. Do we know exactly what they're going to do? Pretty much.
Yeah, I think we probably know what they're going to do, but I wouldn't be averse if I was the Raiders if someone really wanted to give them a haul because they're going to be year one of a new coach. The roster needs a lot of work. Could they load up and build the roster up and drop in a quarterback later on? It would be an option. I'm not sure it's the option they'll take because you can never guarantee to be the number one pick again in the following year and have your choice of who you want. And there is a quarterback probably that teams will want to have. But yeah, they've not played themselves into a bad situation by having that first overall pick in a class where there may be people trying to scramble for one or two players.
Yeah, they're very fortunate, right? Because they've got the number one pick when there's one quarterback available. So if they're ready to take a quarterback, then brilliant. If they're not, then they're going to have the whole league fighting over trading up for that pick. I think it's pretty obvious that they'll go Mendoza. I think it will be almost a historic haul to get out of it, considering the franchise and what is the third time in franchise history they've got the number one pick. New regime coming in, I think they'll probably want to make a statement. Is Mendoza a number one pick worthy player? I'm not sure I've entirely convinced myself of that. I think if you compare him to other quarterbacks in other classes, they're certainly more explosive and exciting players, but that isn't always what wins you football games in the NFL, right? And I agree with you. I do think trading back would be a worthy option. You look at their offensive line, which was absolutely terrible. It's the second worst offensive line unit in the NFL last season. 40.7 pressure rate on true dropbacks for Geno Smith and 11.1% sack rate, which is the third worst in the NFL. They're desperate for decent offensive linemen, and they also don't really have many weapons outside of the tight ends to throw to. So there's different ways you could go. It all depends on what the philosophy is with team building here. I think it's whether you draft the quarterback, build the team around him, or whether you want to build the team and then drop the quarterback in. The problem is never a guarantee in future classes. We've spoken that this class was gone, this class was going to be great, and now look at it, we're talking about there's one that potentially you'd want to start on day one. So it can quickly fall apart. It doesn't matter how good the 2027 class looks right now. It doesn't always work that way, so I think you probably just have to take the sure thing while it's in front of you.
Yeah, I think there's always that temptation, oh, just what about next year? What about next year? And we've seen it now, we've been doing this long enough that next year doesn't always come. That's that promised land of these great quarterbacks and there's going to be a bucket load doesn't always happen. I think the Raiders will just take that option, but and just go for the quarterback because they're really in purgatory otherwise, and I can't see them being able to do much better at the moment. But yeah, I think that it'll be a long, drawn out process of talking it over and over and over again about that first overall pick.
Yeah, and you just don't overthink it. That he's a pro ready. His processing's really good. I think he's quite a safe pick in. So I'm quite confident of the type of play you're getting with him. As it's been 18 years since they selected a quarterback in the first round. I think this now seems like the time.
Indeed. So that's the Raiders picking first. Up next behind them, another team. Well, quite a lot of teams they could do with a quarterback, but we'll be taking one. It's the Jets. The only team in the top six that will have the same coach, Aaron Glenn. What do we expect from year two of them?
That's a question and a half, isn't it? Them to be rubbish again, probably. That's always a safe bet with the Jets. They hold a lot of capital over the next 2 years. They got the number 2 pick and the number 15 pick in the first round of this year's draft, and they've got one
of the first rounders next year.
Yeah, 3 next year, and they've got quite a high second round pick as well this year as well. That they'll be also. They've done quite well out of trading their veterans, but that only works out if you pick good players. They're in a really, really awkward position here now, considering Dante Moore has decided to return to Oregon. Him leaving means that it's going to take a monster haul if they want to get up to number 1, especially given the capital that the Raiders know that they have. I mean, you just go straight in and ask for all of them and just see what happens, right? And then you work your way back, because it'll take something massive. And I'm not sure Mendoza's the type of prospect that you'd want to be given all that up for. So he's not like in the same kind of conversations we were talking about with Drake May or with Caleb Williams. I wouldn't put him in that bucket, although he is very, very good. There's a way I suppose that Jets could package 2 and 15 and see what happens and see what they take. I'm sure it'll be a conversation that they'll hold together, but I just don't think the Raiders will bite on that. So I think it's a really, really difficult decision for them to have because of how shallow this draft class is. Overall, this class, I wouldn't say it was weak, but I'm used the word shallow because there's probably 14 players that you're quite happy taking in the first round and you'd be happy with that. And then outside of that, it does massively fall off and you're going to get teams reaching for needs. I think you could see all sorts of trades happening, especially for veterans, because I would compare this class quite similarly to 2022, actually, which we spoke about as quite a weak class, but didn't actually work out like that. It was weak in terms of blue chip prospects. But on day 3, there wasn't much happening. The Jets could go either way. I think they're desperate need for another wide receiver outside of Garrett Wilson. There's 3 there, but Makai Lemon from USC, Jordan Tyson, Arizona State, and Carnell Tate from Ohio State. I'm not sure I particularly would want to pick any of them at number 2, but that just might be the position you're going to be, because it's going to be one of those drafts where you go, I don't really want to pick that player at number 3, but there's really no one else on the board. There's some really good players here. I'm just not sure you've got the caliber of blue chip prospect that we've seen previously, which really doesn't play into the Jets' hands.
I think Dante Moore going back to school is a blessing in disguise for the next Jets head coach. I think Aaron Glenn will get this year and he'll be gone because he'll be terrible. I think if they'd taken Dante Moore, it would ruin him because the Jets are awful at the moment. And I think the next head coach coming in will have the option of getting his quarterback in and probably had 2 pretty good picks from this draft as well. I think if they're away from the quarterback market, there is some good defensive players I think that they could probably acquire early in this draft. And then it's not without the realms of possibility that pick is at 15 or 16, they could get 15, a wide receiver there depending on what happens. Even if they wanted to move up a little bit, they've got a lot of day 2 capital to bump themselves up as well. So there's all in play for it. I just don't think it'll be great for Aaron Glenn. It'll be for the next one up, I think.
Yeah, it makes sense as well, going on back to more. It just makes sense because you look at the history of players who have been drafted in the first round with so little starts as he has. He's only really a 1-year start. He played, was it 5 games at UCLA, but really just hasn't started. And you're looking at those players, you're thinking Anthony Richardson, Trey Lance, Dwayne Haskins. Like, it just isn't a massive. The bust rate is high, shall we say? So It does make sense, and he transferred from UCLA to Oregon and sat a year, so he's got a history of making good decisions. It seems like he's got a pretty decent cohort of people around him to help him make those decisions. So I'm sure he'll come out of it pretty well. It's cost him a lot of money because it's almost certain that he would have gone in either one or two. So he's bet, what is it, 35 million, close to that guaranteed for going number 2, something like that. That's a lot of money to have turned down. So fair play. It would have been a very difficult decision to make, but boys, it cost the Jets big time because I'm sure he would have slotted straight in there.
Indeed. Abandon all hope, Jets fans. You heard it. No, you didn't hear it.
It's just what do you do? There's needs. There's wide receiver. You could go edge. I mean, Arvel Reese is a linebacker who we think was going to play on the edge quite a lot, almost like a Jalen Walker type player, where he's a bit of a hybrid, bigger but a bit of a hybrid. He's got comparisons to Micah Parsons. If he lives up to that, then great. Take him with number 2. But there's a lot of those players that you think you can see that player makes sense. But with the number 2 pick, I'm sure they would love to trade down and get them, but it just isn't going to work like that in this draft.
Indeed. Picking at 3, the Arizona Cardinals, who lost 9 in a row to finish the season. Not a great team. Lots to do. Another team who could maybe do with a stacked quarterback class, but that isn't the case. Any ideas here, guys?
They were supposed to be good on defense this year, and they weren't. I think and that's why they are now in the head coach market. I think because Gannon was a defensive-minded head coach, and the defense was pretty poor.
Ranked 27th in the NFL.
Yeah,
averaged
and that was
28.4 points per game.
Well, there you go, stats man at it. But these, they were supposed to be a good unit, and they just weren't. So I could see them maybe looking at some of the options on that side of the ball, but their offense, they don't have a lot of weapons either. Marvin Harrison has been okay. He's not been quite as advertised, but he could do with a bit of help. But who's going to be throwing him the ball? There's another option for them as well. I think they're going to have to go into the veteran market. I don't think that they're going to continue with Kyler Murray for next year. They were not great with him. They're not great without him. There's a lot of options. There's a lot of things that they do need. Yeah, I think the floor's pretty wide open for them to just pick who I think is the best player. The best player available on the board at the time.
Yeah, it's the quarterback position is such a difficult one for them to work out because of the money that Kyler Murray's owed. No one's trading for him because they'll just wait for him to be cut. That's going to cost a lot of money, and then you've got to dip back into the veteran market, which again is going to be costly. It really hasn't fallen well for the Cardinals either. You said the defense was bad, so 27th in the NFL. The offense was even worse, ranked 29th, only averaged 16.8 points per game. I really don't know where they go. And you could say that with so much in this. You think, right, just take the blue chip player, but there's so much for them to mull over. One of the receivers, brilliant. I really like Mekhi Lemon. I think he's one of those crafty Jalen Waddle-esque receivers who would pair really well with Marvin Harrison. I also wonder whether they might look at the offensive line. They drafted that guy from Ohio State, Paris Johnson. Whether that's something they look at again. Spencer Fano would be the top-rated tackle. It's probably early for him, but I wonder if maybe that's something they would look at. He's got versatility to play either tackle spot. I say the Cardinals, the offensive line was ranked 29th, and Murray was constantly under pressure. So I wonder whether that is something they explore. But yeah, I think it's one of those where you just take the best player available on the board. The problem is they have invested quite a lot on the defensive line, and quite the prospects at the top of this board are defensive linemen, especially edge rushers. So I wonder whether that stops them. It probably doesn't because of the pressure rate. It hasn't been great, but they will have a lot of players on the line if that's the case. So I do wonder whether they maybe look at offensive line Spencer Fano, but if not, I'd be more than happy with one of the receivers here.
Their general manager, Monty Osborne, hasn't been shy of moving around. There was a couple of years ago when he moved down and then he moved back up again within that first round. But is it the draft that teams are going to be scrambling to move? They might do because there's that few players, but you don't want to drop yourself out of getting one of those few players either. Yeah. So you wouldn't want to drop massive flower, but I wouldn't be surprised if they're one of the teams in that top 5, 6 who shuffles around a little bit, gets a bit of extra capital, and even in future years if they want to do that, or something late in those later rounds where they can pick up a couple of good players that you would be quite happy with on day two.
Yeah, and that goes back to what I was saying before about the drop off, that teams in the top 10 I don't think will want to move very much because they're guaranteed to get one of the best players in the draft. You move back, say, from 8 or 9 all the way back into the 20s, and the drop off in the caliber of player you're getting is quite steep. So I think you won't see much movement in the top 10 for that reason, or if you do, it'll be amongst those teams as they move out. But I don't think you're going to, unless it's a team packaging a lot of picks up to make it worthwhile, probably future picks as well. Then I can't see it. Could they move back with a team like the Browns or something like that where they package up? Maybe, but I don't think there's a player there that people or teams would be willing to package up a lot of capital to go up and get.
Up next, picking 4, the final team on a 3-14 record. A team who don't need a quarterback, probably. Tennessee Titans. What do we think?
I bet they wish they lost another game. Because if they were in number 1 and had a quarterback, they would be absolutely laughing at the moment. But they didn't do that. They played too well in some games that they didn't need to. I think with Tennessee Titans, they'll have a new head coach. Again, it's just that who's the best player on your board, because they've got weaknesses all over the shop, really. I don't think there's one unit in their team you say, yeah, they're sorted, and I think whoever they have as their best player available on the board at that time, whether it's on either side of the ball, whether it's pass rush, whether it's O-line, whether it's wide receiver, I think they just take who they've got as their number 1 ranked player.
Yeah, I think immediately the pass rush has been really bad, so I think you'll immediately...
Yeah, for a long time.
Yeah, you look at those players. Already mentioned Alvaro Reese, 6'4", 243 pounds. He is probably one of those elite players in this draft that will go very early as teams scramble for him, say, compared to Micah Parsons. Really versatile. He could be a consensus top linebacker and top edge when it comes to it, depending on how you want to play it. 1 year starter, but it was a monster year from him. And then the jury's out on Ruben Bain. His arm length is going to be the massive issue with. We're expecting his arms to come in sub 31 inches, but his tape is worthy of legitimate top 5 talent in my eyes. It's absolute destructor, really good bend, but strong as well. There's rumours that he could move on the inside if people aren't happy with his arm length. And the other player I wonder if will go higher is David Bailey, who's explosive. I think it's a pick your flavour option there. There's the group of edge rushers at the top are all quite different to each other, but similar in grade. So it's just a matter of picking what type of rusher you want. But I think Tennessee desperately needs to generate pressure, so I immediately think that they'll try and address that.
And I think that depends on who comes in as their head coach as well, what kind of scheme that they run. There will be different edge rushers will work with different schemes, and whoever comes in, and whether that's an even offensive mind who brings over his own defensive coordinator, that'll probably go into that decision. But yeah, I think probably you're right, Wayne, that pass rush is something that the Tennessee Titans, other than their interior with Simmons, have they had a good pass? When was the last time they had a good pass rusher? It's been a long time.
Yep, a lot to come out in the mud depending on who hires who. The team who have made a hire, it's the New York Giants. Brought in John Harbaugh. A team who love to win at the end of the season and play themselves, knock themselves down the draft board. So the Giants picking at 5. Any thoughts? What do you reckon John Harbaugh will have to say on this?
Yeah, they've just given him. Yeah, how much do you want and what do you want for it?
Please take this check, fill it in.
Yeah. I have been, before we started recording it, I've been thinking about what the Giants what it would mean and which direction they go. And I'm at a loss really as to which direction this sends it. Do they look at defense or do they look at, because I think the immediate goes to offensive line and to wide receiver. And I think because of Jackson Dart, that's what you should do. But the defense obviously also needs additions as well. Their secondary has been terrible. The offensive line ranked 28th in pass block per win rate last season. Dart was sacked 47 times. Running game was dreadful as well, 3.6 yards per carry. That's tied for the worst in the NFL. So, again, I'll go back to offensive line. If Spencer Fano's there, I think that's a home run pick for them because he doesn't necessarily fix everything, but it gives you that base on the offensive line. Play him at right tackle and try and protect Jackson Dart.
Yeah, I think the obviously we've talked about the top players on the defensive side of the ball being worth that high pick or all the edge rushes. That's not something that the New York Giants are massively in need of. They've got a decent edge group there with Brian Burns and Kayvon Thibodeau has been okay, and then obviously Abdul Carter last year as well. So I think the defensive side of the ball, and the only other kind of defensive player you're thinking about, is that is Caleb Downs. But are you picking a safety at 5? You'll get slaughtered if you pick a safety at 5.
That's what I was thinking. He knows what I was thinking. It's high, but he knows the impact that Kyle Hamilton had on that Ravens, and we're talking one of the best players in the NFL, right? And if you thought you were getting Kyle Hamilton, then you would take that with the number 5 pick. But
it's a difficult one though, isn't it? Selling a safety at 5 is because if it goes wrong, it's if you go wrong with an offensive lineman or you go wrong with a pat, we'll pick the right type of player in the right slot. If you go wrong with a safety, that is
right, and that
really difficult.
Brian
to
Daboll
justify.
wouldn't have got away with it, but does John Harbaugh?
Harbaugh might though.
Exactly.
He might though because he's new. Yeah, he's got that reputation. If that's who he wants, and he wants to start building that type of defense.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It depends how much impact he's had as well. Because I think you look at what the Ravens have done in their first round picks. They've drafted Zay Flowers and Rashad Bateman, but they've not really gone after those weapons as such in the first round. Mm-hmm. That they tend to go best player available, and then look at the trenches. Best player available is probably an edge rusher, and we already think that they'll probably look elsewhere. I do wonder how high wide receiver will be on their board if they really like Carnell Tate or Jordan Tyson, who will complement Malik Neighbors. I think Makai Lemon and Malik Neighbors are actually quite similar in play style, so I don't know if that necessarily makes sense in terms of explosive deep threat, but if you want a contested catch guy, then looking at Carnell Tate or Jordan Tyson does make sense because they're desperate for weapons.
They've got to do something to stop Jackson Dart and Cam Scatterville killing themselves.
Yeah,
they've got to, they've got somebody who can get open and he's not having to hold onto the ball for about 3 years and getting absolutely blasted and running about and injuring himself. I think that is a consideration. In all seriousness, we laugh about Dart and Scatterville and the crazy running about, but it is a concern because he only was out with 1 concussion, but he was in the blue tent a hell of a lot.
Yeah, they only averaged 3.6 yards per carry. So although they were tied for the worst as well. So,
Dart was only. Yeah, it was Dart. Sorry, I was speaking. It was only in that tent, out with 1 concussion, but he was in there every week.
Mm-hmm. Leads us to the Cleveland Browns with the record-breaking Myles Garrett. Many questionable quarterbacks and not much else. What are we thinking here for the Browns?
I think this might be the first wide receiver spot if they've not gone, because they're not going to get a quarterback this year. They spent a fortune on quarterbacks. They've got, I don't know how many still they're paying on the books and things. So
14, I think.
Are Shador and Dylan Gabriel long-term answers? I don't think so, from what we've seen of them. But we're obviously thinking about in the future, next man up. They've not really had. Probably the best receiver last year was Harold Fanning.
Yeah.
I think that might be a consideration, and particularly if the offensive line has gone, Spencer Fano's off the board. If he's gone, I think that might be an option for Cleveland, is thinking about that wide receiver options.
Yeah, it's interesting thinking about runs, and I think this could be the spot that the first wide receiver comes off the board. There could also be 2 gone already. And the same with the offensive line, that Fano could have gone as through what he's spoken about, 3 teams that Fano could potentially be linked with. but they also would have loved him. I do wonder whether Francis Maui-Goa comes into the conversation here. It's probably early for a lot of players, but I do think he'll go higher than many analysts predict. And the interior versatility with the Cleveland Browns, I think, would make sense because they're just desperate for anyone on that offensive line at the moment. You look at the contracts expiring. It might be a bit early at number 6, but we'll wait and see what his true value is. Wide receivers. The three of them all have different skill sets. We've said that, so it's just a matter of them picking their flavour. And the last thing would be linebacker. We really don't know what's going to happen with Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah with his rehab, which seems to have another setback. So if he is out for another season, then, which the Browns should know, I would hope they do, then Arvel Reese, if he's still here, would be slam dunk. I think they would take Arvel Reese if he is available. His teammate Sonny Styles is going to go quite highly as well as a linebacker, so he's one to watch there too. But they've got 2 first rounders, so I don't think there's going to be any way they get up. For a quarterback, as much as they need it, because respectively, Sanders and Gabriel were ranked both. They were both ranked last in EPA per dropback. Sanders was last, Gabriel was second to last, so it hasn't particularly gone that well for them. And say the offensive line is crumbling, shall we say? So we'll see what they do with their first 2 first rounders, because they've got number 28. So do they trade down? Trade down candidate potentially, depending if they've got their heart set on offensive line and Fano is gone. Maybe they're one of those teams that go, we'll move down a couple of spots and pick up one of the other tackles later on, because the tackles it's a premium position that isn't, maybe it's a position that's not necessarily as strong in terms of a class as other, but they will end up going, because again the drop off happens considerably after the first 2 or 3. So it's one of those picks they can't really afford to miss on. So I don't think it's possible because of how many directions they could go. I mean, I'm sure it's the Cleveland Browns, they could mess it up if they'll find a way. But there's plenty of players that they've got positions they got to choose from that they'll be able to get decent value for.
Good stuff. And then next we have the Washington Commanders. Bit of a shock. It was meant to be another step forward for them, but obviously Jaden Daniels injured most of the season. They can hopefully take advantage of picking in the top 7. What are your thoughts, guys?
I think they need to get younger overall.
Mm-hmm.
They've got a lot of they picked up a lot of veterans, to kind of round out that roster, like Bobby Wagner and Andrew Wiley and a few other people that are getting up there in age now. They took who did they take? They took the tackle last year. Who was it?
Josh Connolly.
So I think that the tack, they've got him on one side, and they still have Tunsil on the other side. So I'm not sure tackle's really high on their list. I think they do want to think about what they surround Jaden Daniels with. However, Terry McLaurin is signed a big contract, but he's 30 now as well. Deebo Samuel didn't really offer prime Deebo Samuel anymore. So again, we're talking about the wide receivers.
Those 3 are going to go. I'm telling you, when you're looking at if people, you might get Mekhi Leonard at 16. You're not.
No,
I would be shocked.
Again, the pass rush is something that could, so if these teams that are needing wide receiver help and pass rush help, we've talked about a lot of them in the first. That's the players that are going to be available. I think they could probably get things that they need, like secondary help later on in the draft. But that's probably where my eye would be going with the Washington Commanders. Either of those 2. Again, it sounds talking a lot of the same about the same teams and the same needs.
Yeah. It's because and that's where the value is, right? That's where we end up speaking about these positions, because automatically you go, well, ESPN said they only had 11 first-round grades. One of them's already come off. There's now 10, right? Because one of them was Dante Moore. So ESPN say they've given 10 first-round grades. You're limited into what direction you go, right? Because you're going to have to, you're at the top of the board. You're going to have to take one of those best players. And I'd say there's the same players coming up again for that reason. Immediately, I go to Caleb Downs with this team, because although you're on about with secondary help, they might be able to get that later on, but you're not getting a Caleb Downs. If he's available, I think he would be a home run pick here.
If he's still
yeah, exactly, yeah, because he's got I think he's the best player in this draft.
Mm-hmm.
That I think he's one of the best and safest college safeties we've seen in recent memory. I think he's comparable to Kyle Hamilton, who I had the number one player in his draft class. I think he transcends positional value concerns because I really do think he's that good, and I think it just makes sense. So, all right, it might not be a premium position, but I think he's a premium player, and that's why he will end up going. The other two in terms of corners, Mansour Delane and Jamad McCoy. McCoy's the consensus top guy, but didn't play at all in 2025.
He got a whole year off.
Can you do that with a top 10 pick? Probably not. Let's be honest.
I mean, we saw we all talked about last year Will Johnson, and he hadn't been out as long as Jamar, and see how far he fell. You know, he was ranked. He was a consensus top 10 pick at one point, and he played a bit and hadn't. You know, he'd been injured, and whatnot, and he fell to the second round. So. But again, with a lack of top-notch players, Jamar McCoy, his tape is excellent from the year previously. But I don't know if they're in a position to just take that risk.
No, I wouldn't be, and I don't think they will. But I suppose when talking about secondary, he is worth having the conversation there. They could also go defensive lines again. They've really got nothing on the defensive front. So in terms of Dan Quinn's scheme, I would expect David Bailey, Ruben Bain to both be in consideration here if they're there.
Indeed, worth noting they picked obviously 7, and they don't pick till pick 7 in round 3, and then pick 7 in round 5. So
not much to work with.
Yeah, maybe have a little wiggle, but let's see. Up next, it's the Saints. Positive signs for Kellen Moore at times. Now they've got a top 10 pick. What could they do?
Had a bit of a pulse at the end of the year. They kind of were just meandering, and then they seem to pick up towards the end of the season. And I think they've just got to see what they've got in Tyler Shook this year and surround him and make the best of that situation for him. He came in and looked okay towards the end of the season, and I think that he's certainly worth another go next year and see, okay, do we have something here and can we build around him? So I think anything that could strengthen that case for him would be not a bad idea. But again, they're the kind of players like the veteran defensive lineman's totally escaped my mind.
Cam Jordan,
you know, those kind of he's kind of coming towards the end of his career. He's been amazing, but you know, there's just that they do like the trench players. Historically the Saints, they've picked in the trenches a lot. So I wouldn't be surprised to see them going back to that. Again, they've done a good bit on their offensive line and the tackles in the last couple of drafts. So if they're looking for players, it's probably interior. So I'm not sure they would go immediately with this pick for an interior player unless
it would be Maui Goa and move him inside, wouldn't it?
Yeah, and move him inside if that's their thinking. But I think whatever they could do to support Tyler Shook's not a bad thing.
Yeah, they're desperate for wide receivers and pass rushers. So you take whichever one player of those is top on your board, you take them. I think David Bailey would be their type of guy. Explosive first step, instant pressure generator. He's got a really hot motor as well. So I could see how he fits in with this scheme. I do start to wonder whether the interior defensive players, the defensive tackles, start being considered at this point.
Creeping up.
Whether that's Peter Woods or even Caden McDonald, who isn't being spoken about enough. He was the Big Ten Defensive Lineman of the Year. Only concern he's only really been 1 year starter, but it would be early. But you know, he's a quality player who I think is the type of player they could go for. Another player maybe to watch here as they creep in with the edge rushers is Kendrick Falk. That is a big bruise in the. For me, it's early, but I think he could have a similar profile to Michael Williams did, and he went much earlier to the 49ers than anyone expected. So that's maybe something to watch for. It would be early for me, but I do wonder if he's the type of profile, a bit like Michael Williams was, that an NFL team will convince themselves into.
Interesting stuff. 9. Who's this? Picking in the top 10.
Welcome to the party.
Yeah.
Where have you been?
It's the Kansas City Chiefs. They were pretty good recently, recent history, right? Yeah, a bit of a fall from grace, injuries, problems, etc. End of an era, probably not. But yeah, like I said, top 10 pick, lost the last 6 games. Not like them, but they might. I've got a feeling they'll enjoy the longer off season, put the feet up, have a nice draft. Probably be a bit annoying again next year. What do you guys think?
Yeah. I think this
Yeah,
is where
it is. I hope it's whoever it is, I hope it's a bust. Just because they've been good for a long time.
There's a name we haven't brought up yet, and that's probably
I know what you're going to say.
The second best player in this entire draft, which is Jeremiah Love, who everyone is linking with the Kansas City Chiefs. And that's because he's going to be a top 3 talent on everyone's board. And we've seen running backs being taken earlier and earlier over recent seasons.
Mm-hmm.
And the Chiefs are desperate for balance on offense. It makes far too much sense. He could well be gone. We haven't mentioned his name until now. If you said that he is... I've got Caleb Downs as number 1, Jeremiah Love would be number 2. Arval Reese would probably be number 3 at the moment in terms of the top of the board. He is a top 3. He will be a top 3 prospect on almost everyone's board because of how it'll fall. Look, he's got versatility. He's a rusher, really good pass blocker as well, which is always an underrated trait moving to the NFL, and really good receiver as well. So you're getting a true 3-down back. Look, could they look elsewhere? Yeah, probably, but you're not getting this type of player at any other position if Caleb Downs is gone.
Yeah, we saw last year Ashton Genty went 6, wasn't it? I think Jeremiah Love's a better prospect than Ashton Genty was.
Yep.
But it's just I just think the other teams above Kansas City have greater needs.
Yeah, I go back to the Cleveland Browns are desperate for that type of rusher, but can they do it with the needs that we spoke about earlier? That I'm not. Yeah, I think those
Kansas City
needs
just don't have the same glaring need for these kind of positions. It's almost one of these picks. Yeah, just write it down. We'll do 800 mock drafts. 9 Kansas City Chiefs. Jeremiah Love.
They're already bored of it. Yeah.
Yeah, we're already bored. We haven't even done a mock draft, and everyone's bored of it. But it makes sense. It does make sense. It makes sense as a pick. So, will it surprise me if they pick him? Absolutely not.
No.
Oh yeah, there we go. Pencil in. It's already done, right?
Let's only jump them. We were on about that. Washington didn't have many many selections. Maybe that is a trade out spot as someone tries to get ahead of Kansas City for him. That's maybe something to be wary of too.
Indeed. So much could happen. Exciting. But yeah, to round out the top 10, it's the Cincinnati Bengals. Another team who would have hoped to still be playing, but are not. And there's some problems there, but wouldn't surprise me if they were good again next year. What do you think, guys?
Someone who's going to sign the contract and be at training camp would be a good start. Because they had an absolute mare with Shamar Stewart at the beginning of this year. It's just been...
It's not really
it was embarrassing, wasn't it? Let's be honest.
It's just been... It was just utter nonsense, and it hasn't really turned it on majorly on the field for them yet. So getting that kind of bit of it sorted is important for the Cincinnati Bengals, because that was an utter shambles. The defense was rubbish.
Yeah.
Absolutely rubbish. But I wonder if all the best defensive players have gone by the time they pick. We've talked about, the 2-3 pass rushers, and we've talked about Caleb Downs and cornerback. They could, is that the first corner? You think like Mansur Delane, is that someone that they could pick as well? I think they've probably got to do something on defense, because their defense was bad.
Yeah, I think if Caleb Downs is there, then you rush to the Cardinals. That's the slam dunk pick here. But say he's a special talent. He likely goes top 7. Let's be honest. Given the Shamar Stewart situation, they still need edge rushers. Right now, they need someone who can instantly and go into that building straight away and win 1-on-1 consistently, because they don't really have that player that can do it.
Apart from Trey Hendrickson, they've tried. I mean, they drafted Shamar Stewart, they drafted Miles Murphy recently. It just hasn't worked.
Yeah,
they've just got nothing from that. So it's not like they've not tried. But it's still a need, and it's disappointing if you've invested that amount of draft capital in pass rushes and you're still looking for one. It's a difficult situation to be in.
Yeah, and they're stuck in the perennial problem of protecting Joe Burrow, which we speak about every single season. So guard could also be on the board again if they really like Maui Goa. Then that does make sense here. But I think ultimately it has to be defense, because they can't go through another season with these kind of numbers and metrics on defense and expect to be challenging for the playoffs, because they're just going to be in the same position again. So they need to do something desperately on defense. Again, you could look on the interior: Peter Woods, Caden McDonald, those type of players who are interior disruptors who are going to help on the front. That they make a lot of sense. But yeah, I'll go Downs, and then just defense, Downs, and then one of the edge rushers, whichever one takes their fancy. But fix the defense first.
Indeed. Well, there we go. That's the top 10. Wraps up pretty nicely. I feel we dipped our toe pretty well. We don't want to we're almost close to like dipping our full foot there, aren't we? We don't want to dive in too deep for our first episode back. But yeah, good stuff. It's been great chatting again, guys. Very excited to dive more into these prospects and talk a bit more about what will happen in this year's draft. Not long to go, it seems. Less than 100 days, I've seen. Senior Bowl's coming up. Boom, it'll be top 5 time soon.
Very soon. We need to get cracking.
Stuff. Yes, we do. But yeah, in the meantime, take care of yourselves. We'll see you very soon. Thank you very much for listening.